Roll call.
Palermo.
Here.
Festerson. Gray.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Melton.
Here.
Pauls. Mr. President.
Here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for opening remarks.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to have a few comments about the season we're in and hopefully spur some people to think about giving to either the energy aid through OPPD or the heat aid through MUD or to the food bank or to the other organizations that are providing food to those this holiday season. All you have to do to get a real quick sense of the magnitude of the suffering this season is to drive by Leavenworth Street when the Together Inc. food bank is open, and the traffic will literally wind from 24th and Leavenworth all the way up to the interstate for people waiting to get food. And that's just one food bank. So if you're in a position this holiday season to help, all of these donations can be made online or by just sending them into the power district, electric district, or to the food banks. So
United Way also with helping with emergency power. They've done a great job and their fund is running very low.
So find a charity that you're comfortable with and you believe in and help them help others. Thanks.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
We have a proclamation to be read by Councilmember Brinker Harding. Mr. Harding.
You want to come down here? Because it's about you.
And we know you didn't want it.
You're right.
That's what makes it more fun. Okay, here it goes. Whereas Paul Kratz graduated from the University of Nebraska Law School in 1975, and whereas after working in private practice and for the Department of Labor, Mr. Kratz was hired by Mayor Hal Daub to be the city attorney for the city of Omaha in 1998. And whereas Mr. Kratz has served on numerous boards and committees to include the American Laboratories Inc. Board of Directors, Cornhusker Football Breakfast Club of Omaha, Dubuque Packing Company Board of Directors, the Certificate of Need Review Committee, and the Presbyterian Church of the Cross. And whereas Mr. Kratz enjoys volunteering his time and being active with the Shriners, the Scottish Rite, the Presbyterian Church of the Cross, YMCA Youth Basketball and Baseball, and the Nebraska and Douglas County Republican parties. And whereas Mr. Kratz has been instrumental in several significant City of Omaha projects to include, but not limited to, the Bob Carey Pedestrian Bridge, TD Ameritrade Park, the College World Series, the city-owned Hilton Hotel, and the Arena and Convention Center. And whereas Mr. Kratz enjoys spending time with his wife Diane, his 2 adult sons Jeff and Gregory, and his 5 grandchildren. And whereas Mr. Kratz will retire December 11th, 2020, after over 22 years of service to the city to enjoy his family and other interests. Whereas now therefore be it resolved that the City of Omaha Council extends their best wishes for an enjoyable retirement and thanks City Attorney Paul Kratz for his numerous contributions to the City of Omaha. In witness whereof, the Omaha City Council has caused the official seal of the City of Omaha to be affixed on this 8th day of December, 2020. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Just a couple quick words. I want to say that it's been enjoyable working with this council. You guys work very well together. You've worked very well with the mayor. Contrary to my first council in 1998 that Ben knows and Brinker knows, we had some very difficult times working together. So I'm glad everybody can get along now. Good luck to you and keep Omaha good. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. We thank you for joining us here today. As a courtesy to those in attendance and to facilitate the conduct of our business, we ask that you turn off or silence all electronic devices. Madam Clerk. Oh. Apparently we have some speakers for the... Oh. Mr. Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. You didn't think we could let Paul Kratz off that easily, do you, after so many years? No, I'd just like to add my words of congratulations, too. And I've had the opportunity to work with Paul for about 20 years in different capacities, in the mayor's office, city council, of course, Chamber of Commerce, even the Peter Kiewit Foundation. So in all those different roles, Paul was always the professional and a facilitator and pro-Omaha in all his viewpoints and perspectives, and so I've appreciated working with him over those many years. In fact, I can say I've never known a city hall without Paul Kratz, which will be different for us going forward when he does retire. I noticed you had a lot of your colleagues here with you earlier, that some of whom have left, that made you look good for so many years, so I want to acknowledge them too, but say thank you on behalf of the taxpayers and the citizens of Omaha. And there is life outside of City Hall, I can guarantee it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be very brief here. Mr. Kratz, I was here as the journalist when you first came, and I thought you weren't going to stay after that one council when you first came in, but I think it's fitting to be here when you leave, and wish you well. Wish you and the family well. Continue to be a supporter in this community. I know you will. I have no doubt about that. You have done a tremendous service for this city. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here, Paul. We appreciate you as you move on to some other things. And we hope that we can find somebody to at least fill half of the shoes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Melton.
Oh, thank you. And Paul, I just want to thank you. Yes, I have, when I started in over here on the courthouse side in 2005, yeah, you've been the city attorney since I became a lawyer. And I appreciate everything you do, and I have to say I've always admired you, and I've looked to you also as a mentor in helping me understand some of the legal issues coming from the criminal side over to the civil side. And you've always been extremely available, always taking my calls, and always will take the time to explain things to me. I can tell you that you are a great role model, especially to younger attorneys and then seasoned attorneys, even like myself, that I appreciate everything you've done. And when you look around, lawyers that give themselves to as public servants, you have spent the majority of your career serving the citizens of Omaha, when you could have been out making a lot more money working for a private firm with the amount of knowledge, the experience, and the talent that you have, but instead you dedicated your talents to the city, and the citizens of Omaha that it's been great for the citizens, and that you've really benefited all of us. So thank you for that, and I do wish you a wonderful, happy, relaxful retirement. So thank you very much, Paul. Hopefully we can get together for the wine club again at some point post-vaccine COVID days.
Thank you. Council Vice President Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Paul, I just wanted to say thank you. Your dedication and work ethic for the city of Omaha has not gone unnoticed. I know over the years we've had many questions for you and your department, and you've always came back with answers, maybe sometimes the answers we didn't want to hear, but it was always for the good of the city. and you've hung with us even during the pandemic as one of the few department heads behind us. And I don't remember that plaque being there before, but I'm sure we could probably allow you to take that with you since you're now officially recognized as a city attorney with that plaque. So thank you for all you've done. Appreciate it. Glad to know you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President. So when I handed Paul the proclamation, I said to him, I think, I don't know if it was more of an apology or a statement, but I said, I feel partly responsible for getting you into this mess because I worked for Hal when we hired Paul. And here's, I think, a little known fact that maybe a lot of people don't realize, but Paul Kratz, since the Omaha City Charter, is our only second city attorney. He succeeded Herb Fiddle, and as Ben said, those are going to be hard shoes to fill. But I know someone will take the challenge up. And again, I thank you for your service. Like Pete, I think you're the only city attorney I've ever known since being involved with the city of Omaha. And I wish we could raise a glass of red wine to you today and cheer your health and enjoyment of your retirement. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'll do one non-law related comment because Mr. Kratz knows, obviously, I think the world of his legal talent and skills and very much appreciate his service to the city. But he and I share a passion for college basketball, and he's the Cornhusker Red and I'm the Creighton Blue. And I'll never forget Paul's welcome and surprise on his face when my wife's uncle gave me a couple tickets for the Creighton, Nebraska game at the new arena down in Lincoln. And we drive down there and we get in the arena, and who's sitting right next to me? Paul Kratz. And he says, and a very nice welcome, so I got to have you here too? you couldn't have worn red? So we had a good time, and Paul, I hope you get to see a lot more of your Cornhuskers and enjoy them with your boys and your grandkids and wife. Madam Clerk.
Item 6, a resolution to approve the final plat for Country Club Estates, Replat 2, located at 6825 State Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 6 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. I also want to congratulate Paul and good luck and enjoy your retirement. It's been a pleasure working with Paul for the number of years that I've been practicing as well. With that, the final plat that's before you today conforms to the preliminary plat that was approved by the council a couple weeks ago. We did provide for the easement that we talked about that provides for the proposed driveway at the crest of the hill. So we did everything that I believe Public Works was requesting of us. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And then I know Mr. Levy here, I believe, is here on behalf of the McAndrews. So any questions you have of me, I'm happy to answer them. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents?
President Jerem, council members, good afternoon. David Levy, Baird Home Law Firm, 1700 Farnham Street, on behalf of the McAndrews, who own Lot 2 at 6875 State Street. I am speaking in opposition, but I am not opposed, or my clients are not opposed to the replat or the proposed residence on Lot 1. Simply the condition of approval that is currently recommended that would require a new access easement and the McAndrews with Lot 2 to tie in to the driveway at some point in the future on this new Lot 1. I've got up there not very well. That condition number 2 there at the bottom is what we're opposed to. Again, no opposition to the replat, and I hope that will go forward today, but the McAndrews request is that it go forward without any requirements applying to them on Lot 2. And let me go through, if I might, a few exhibits here. And I'll show you, I'll start just...
Mr. Levy, if I could just excuse you. We have an electronic device in this part of the room that's been going off now twice, and we ask that you please silence or turn off your device or you'll be removed from the room. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, President Jerem. Could you zoom out on this one just a little bit? Oh. Got it. Have to do this ourselves now. So just real quickly for context, again, you may all know this, but Lot 1 here in the front is the proposed replat. Lot 2 in the back is my client's, the McAndrews, and this is their driveway currently. And all they're asking is to be allowed to keep that driveway and not have to tie into the to the Lot 1 driveway in the future. Here's a picture of Lot 2's driveway, which has been there since 1930 or 1931, and this is a picture from that time. So again, this is the driveway that they have 90 years ago, and it's the driveway that they would like to keep today. That simply is their request. Public Works has requested in the future that they might tie in to the driveway with Lot 1 as a matter of safety, and I can appreciate that. I think Public Works, of course, has good intentions in that. But in requiring that in this case, it goes too far. It's a significant burden on the owners of Lot 2 to take a driveway that's been there for 90 years. There's no history of accidents. The McAndrews have lived there since 2014. They have not had any accidents. They have not had any close calls. They're not aware of any issues with their driveway that would cause or provide evidence to support the imposition of tying into the driveway on Lot 1. It also really is impractical, if not impossible. So here's the driveway that would fit within the proposed easement area, if you can see the purple lines there, hopefully. That would be approximately an 11% grade. When you're in the mountains and you're driving on steep grades and they say, be careful of your brakes or runaway, trucks, be careful, those are 6, 8, 10% grades. An 11% grade is a significant grade. You can also see there the tight kind of S-turn for both of those. That simply would not allow, for example, the truck that comes every year to pump out the McAndrews septic tank to get up and down that. A truck with a trailer with construction equipment or a tree clearing, tree trimming, construction, whatever it might be, would just simply not work with that driveway. It just doesn't work. Again, I appreciate the intention, but it just, when you take the intent and marry it with the practical reality, or try to, they just don't go together. They're not compatible. So here is a driveway with an 8% grade, which probably accommodates a truck. You can see what that does to the owners of Lot 1, to the Burts. That's a significant imposition on their property. It also, with grading and retaining walls and so forth, we estimate roughly is a $50,000 to $75,000 item. So it's not just that the McAndrews don't want to connect, it's that it's really a significant imposition on them to do so. And finally, here's the original plat. The other problem with connecting, and I can't do it here, but if you were to overlay the longer 8% grade driveway over the original plat, you can see these hatched areas are the septic fields for Lot 1. That driveway would go right on top of those septic fields. You can't pave, or you don't want to pave over a septic field in case you ever have to go dig it up to fix it, right, to clear it out. So for all those reasons, the McAndrews, the owners of Lot 2, again, not opposed to the replat, no animosity or opposition to the Burt's house or to having the new driveway at the top of the hill. They just simply want to be left out of it and left to keep the driveway that they have going forward. I appreciate your patience. I know that went on a little bit long, but I wanted to tell the whole story. It's kind of a unique situation. And so with that, I will stop, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. So this is in my district, and as we talked a few weeks ago during preliminary plat, I am supportive of this moving forward. But I also mentioned how State Street between 60th and 72nd is truly a special street if you've never seen it. It's got a really awesome tree canopy. And so I think the objective is correct here, to try and have as few access points as possible along that street to maintain it as it is. But this is truly a special circumstance, I think, where we just have one house that's being redone that would have its own access now as a result of this final plat. But then a current property owner with the current drive, as Mr. Levy was describing, that just wishes to keep his current driveway that's historical in nature, which is understandable too. And in fact, should there be no changes today, that most likely would be the scenario going forward, unless and until there'd be some kind of major redevelopment on that property, which may or may not ever even happen. So as a practical matter, I'm supportive of doing what Mr. Levy has described, whereby both property owners can achieve what they're trying to achieve here with minimum impact. I do understand the public works analysis and why they have the position they do, but having been to the street and having discussed it with both property owners, I think this would be an amicable resolution amongst all of them. I know the proponents of the project just want to see something move forward, whichever happens here today, and so they would also be supportive of either outcome, even though they've, of course, worked with the department to do what they needed to do to have this before us today. So there may be some additional questions, and I can answer them too if you'd like. I do have the motion before me, though, that would make this happen, and so what I'll do is make that motion, but should that fail for whatever reason, I'll still motion to move the project forward as is, should the removal of this condition not be successful. Having said that, what I'll do is motion to approve item number 6, subject to condition 1 only, and resubmittal of the final plat to remove the easement originally required by condition 2. And what that accomplishes is just keeping the driveway the same way it is as described by Mr. Levy today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Melton.
Thank you. And Mr. Jobin, I just wanted to confirm something.
I think Ben seconded.
Because I don't want to make any assumptions, but I would assume that your clients are perfectly fine with letting the McAndrews keep their driveway and not cutting across to theirs. Is that correct? I mean, your
Well,
clients, it doesn't really impact them other than they would just never have to share a driveway. Is that right?
That's true, because the condition was to provide this access easement for one driveway if and when they would ever substantially redevelop their property on their side. So that may or may not ever happen anyway.
But I mean, in all honesty, you just had it in there because
Right.
you're required to, by the city.
That's correct. And we do believe that is the safest driveway location on the crest of the hill, but the driveway is going to exist today. It existed yesterday. It's going to exist tomorrow. And if and when something occurs in the future with respect to that one lot, which may never happen. So, yeah, I would say that kind of is what it is.
Okay. I mean, so I guess what I was saying is I wouldn't think that, in fact, I would think this would be beneficial to your clients, just knowing that they wouldn't ever have to connect their driveway.
Right.
If we made this exception.
Well, we can obviously live with the two driveways because we're going to live with them anyway until something may happen in the future. So, yes.
Okay.
But we do appreciate Public Works and their willingness to work with us on this matter to push this forward and allow for this access at what we believe is the safer
I agree.
location.
I mean, I agree. Your
So-
clients should have the access too. I mean, to
Right.
me, just leaving it the way it is with your plans and
Yeah,
their current existing
Yes.
might just be the best way
right.
to do it.
And we're fine with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think I agree with Councilman Festerson. I mean, I understand Public Works and planning and having rules and things that we need to follow for consistency. But also, when you're doing that, there have to be times when we need to make some common sense exceptions for very unique situations. And I would say this is a unique situation. And Mr. Levy, I guess this morning I was kind of having trouble trying to understand exactly what we were arguing about. And you really clarified that for me. And I appreciate the photos in looking at, I mean, a 90-year-old drive like what they have. I mean, to me, it doesn't make any sense. And I understand we're not making anyone do anything now, but to require something in the future without even knowing what that may be, I think it's not something that we should be addressing today. And when we're talking about safety issues, normally that's going to be number one when I'm looking at things, but we're talking about one house. So we're talking about one or 2 drivers just from that house. We're not talking about a safety issue at an intersection. We're really talking about a very, very limited amount of comings and goings from that driveway. And I don't believe there were any reports of any accidents at this point, and it's been there 90 years. So I would say that this is an example when the city council needs to just use some common sense for a unique situation, and I will support the amendment.
Thank you. Councilmember Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. By listening to this, we're talking about 1 or 2 people, their houses. I almost started to cry. Because, the planning department, they said, hey, we need to do what we are proposing, not the amendment. On 1 or 2 houses. We're making such a big deal about this. I want us just to reflect back to 204th and Dodge, 192nd and Q, 180th and Harrison. When we put these big storage sheds, and I call them sheds, in neighborhoods where people look right out. In other words, on 192nd and Q, I could be living in this house, across the street, I see this 3-story building. Well, that was okay. I'm just trying to say is we're really spending a lot of time on this little part of life when these other issues, we just sort of let them happen because that's the way it's supposed to be. Go 180th and Harrison, I'm at a middle school. What do? I look right out at another storage shed. So I think we ought to really start thinking about some of these when we make some of these decisions. I'm not opposed to your amendment. I'm just saying it's surprising when you get good attorneys up in front of us, it seems like we do what they bid us to do. I will vote for this, but I think let's look at the bigger picture because we do some of these things because on those 3 intersections, we have affected several hundred houses and people and what it looks like. Now we're talking about this nice little road that's been there for a number of years. I get it, and I like to preserve that. But I think sometimes when we start making some of these decisions, we ought to reflect on some of the past things we do and maybe the future ones. That's my sermon for today.
Thank you, Councilmember Pauls. We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Items 7 to 9 can be considered together for Deer Crest, located southeast of 114th and State Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 7, an ordinance to rezone this property from AG District to R4 District. Item 8, a resolution to approve the final plat for Deer Crest. Item 9, a resolution to approve the Deer Crest subdivision agreement.
The public hearing on items 7, 8, and 9 begin at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. My name is Mark Johnson. My address is 11440 West Center Road. I'm appearing today on behalf of the applicant, Celebrity Homes, here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Items 10 to 12 can be considered together for Lakeview 168, located southwest of 168th and Ida Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 10, an ordinance to rezone this property from AG District to R4 District. Item 11, a resolution to approve the final plat for Lakeview 168. Item 12, a resolution to approve the Lakeview 168 subdivision agreement.
The public hearing on items 10, 11, and 12 begin at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon again, Mr. President, members of the council. This time I'll do this one unmasked. Sorry about that. Again, appearing on behalf of the applicant, Celebrity Homes, here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Items 13 to 17 can be considered together for Everett Place, Replat 1, located southwest of 192nd and Hardy Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Items 13 and 14 are ordinances to rezone this property from AG District and R5 District to DR District and R5 District. Item 15, a resolution to approve the final plat for Everett Place, Replat 1. Item 16, a resolution to approve a special use permit to allow daycare services in the R5 District. And item 17, a resolution to approve the Everett Place Replat 1 subdivision agreement.
The public hearing on items 13 through and including number 17 begin at this time. Are there any proponents?
My name's Kyle Hazy with E&A Consulting Group, 10909 Mill Valley Road, representing the applicant. As you can see on our exhibit we have shown here, it shows some of the existing uses around it. We are proposing the rezone of R5 in the corner, and then some rezone the R5 with the DR section of existing wetlands, and then a special use permit for this section where there is an existing home that is looking to be turned into a Montessori school. With that, I'll make myself available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hazy. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Items 18 to 22 can be considered together for Country Club Plaza, Replat 1, located southwest of 72nd and State Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 18, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the ACI 4 overlay district to incorporate this property into that district. Items 19 and 20 are resolutions to approve the preliminary plat and final plat for Country Club Plaza, Replat 1. Item 21, a resolution to approve a large project special use permit for this location. Item 22, a resolution to approve the Country Club Plaza Replat 1 subdivision agreement.
The public hearing on items 18 through and including 22 begin at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, City Council members. Jim Bouger, 10250 Regency Circle, here on behalf of the applicant. This project is located at generally 680 in State, just south of there, about a half a mile. Just to give you a perspective, this is 72nd Street heading north. The subject property is right here at the intersection of 72nd and State Street. It's about a 25-acre parcel. This project was originally platted as Country Club Estates. It was 4-lot subdivision, commercial subdivision. The lots that abutted 72nd Street had an ACI 4 overlay. The property's been developed under an SID for about 20 years, so it's been sitting there largely vacant for quite a few years. My client has a few items on the agenda today. There's a request for replat. We're going to combine the 3 existing lots into one single lot. There's an ACI 4 overlay that will apply to the entire district, the entire replatted lot. And there's a special use permit for a large project and a conditional use permit for warehousing and distribution. It's a 25-acre site, as I said. There's put some other pictures up here. Some perspective on what the project will look like when it's constructed. 140,000 square foot building with quite a bit of parking surrounding the project. It's a last mile distribution center. There was a operating statement that was submitted with the application, which generally described the project. There's going to be 24/7 operations from the project. There will be some semi-deliveries that will occur overnight, about 25 or so. So there will not be any really impact from semi-traffic during the daytime hours or during peak hours. There will be quite a few delivery vans that will be departing and arriving at the site on a daily basis. However, this particular developer has facilities throughout the country and has kind of learned that the departure and arrival scheme needs to be developed around the peak hour traffic. So the way this facility will operate is the drivers will arrive sometime between 8:30 and 9 in the morning. The initial set of deliveries will leave somewhere between 9:30 and 10 o'clock in the morning, and there will be 3 waves of essentially vans that depart from the project to make deliveries throughout the region. And so the other really nice thing and why this is an ideal site for this project is that it's located a half mile from 680. So the most, all, if not all of the traffic will be departing to 680, going to 29, going to 80 for their deliveries, and then accessing the various parts of Omaha, surrounding counties, which is the delivery zone for this particular operation. The delivery vans then will return somewhere between 7 and 9 at night, and that cycle will repeat on a daily basis. As I said, it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. There's a lot of curiosity. The project right now is named Project Viking. When they are ready to announce the actual name of the distributor, everybody will recognize the name of the company, but they're not able to disclose that at this point. From a neighborhood standpoint and impacts, we have, when the developer, Scannell Properties, first came into town and worked with me, I said, one of the biggest, there's not a ton of development in this area, but you do have a neighbor that has a very nice project immediately to the east, and that would be Omaha Country Club. And Omaha Country Club has spent a fair amount of money, largely in connection with the last PJ tournament that they had 4 years ago or 5 years ago. They did some improvements to 72nd Street. They do have a very good interest or strong interest in preserving the view corridors out there. We've been working with OCC quite closely to develop some landscaping buffers and some other dealing with some other issues, including they're hosting the big golf tournament again this summer, and we've agreed to work around that to provide them access. They use that area for bus circulation for traffic, and so we've agreed to work with them, and we have a letter agreement with the OCC group, and that was, again, a very amicable discussion, but it required a lot of work behind the scenes. So, and we did have a neighborhood meeting to meet with other folks that would be interested in the area. Actually, it was my first sort of neighborhood meeting that we conducted by Zoom, and that went well. We had a few participants in it that own some of the surrounding properties. Went well, and I think that based upon no neighborhood objection that we're aware of, there's full support for this project in the area. So we're happy to answer any questions. We'll create several hundred jobs. They're good paying jobs, at least $15 an hour, full benefits. There's a pretty good economic benefit to our city by having this facility located there. So happy to answer any questions, and we do have a developer representative and the engineer here too, if there's any specific questions on the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is in my district, and I appreciate Mr. Boucher coming down here and giving that overview. He did a really nice job, and I think addressed most questions I had. Maybe just a few follow-ups. And I do appreciate the name Project Viking being Danish. We won't disclose who I think this employer will be, but it is a substantial investment, about $40 million at that site that, as he mentioned, is largely undeveloped at this time, and a creation of about 130 jobs, which I see as positive and I'm supportive of. I think they did do a nice job engaging the neighborhood and Omaha Country Club as a major stakeholder just to the east. And as he mentioned, there is some sensitivity to the landscaping of the area. The median there was all landscaped philanthropically, and it's still maintained and looks a lot better than it used to. And I believe the site is, by elevation, a bit lower than 72nd Street itself. So I think it's correct in pointing out that this elevation of the building won't be something that's readily seen from the street, and certainly not across the street. I did receive a few questions about access and traffic, but I think you addressed those well. Not more than 25 trucks, it sounds like, long trucks per day, and that's mostly overnight. And then, of course, some of the van deliveries during the day. I think adopting the ACI area is a positive too, because it does make these landscaping improvements part of the zoning application. I think you do have some visuals of that landscape. Are you able to show those too?
Yeah, I do have a little bit to help with that. I've got a couple of drawings here. So this shows a little bit of the landscaping. I've got some of the visuals from the elevation standpoint as well from a couple of the intersections. If that's helpful. Trish, so she has a note on here. That's the view from State Street and 75th Street, looking southeast. This is a visual from 72nd and State Street, the intersection, looking southwest. So you can see some of between the elevation and some of the landscape buffers that are going to be there, that there really is not a lot of visual impact. It will look different. There's somewhere between 12 and 18 foot of grade that's going to be built, made up with some retaining walls. They're going to start grading in January is the plan. Hope to have the facility open by October, but there is a need to get, obviously before the next holiday season, to try and get the facility open, and they're willing to spend a little extra money to push dirt in January and February, which is not really a typical thing in Omaha, Nebraska. So,
Fair to say a substantial screening along 72nd Street.
there'll be substantial screening, yes.
Yep.
And again, that was part of what we worked out with OCC, and I think you'll see that on their site too, on the other side of 72nd Street, there you may see some additional landscaping. It's just an open field right now, but I think there's been some funds that have been provided or will be provided to allow them to, again, to increase the landscape buffer, in part for the tournament and to create a better visual effect along 72nd Street.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And you did just start to talk about the timeline. So if approved today, you're thinking groundbreaking in January and completion by October.
It's a very aggressive time frame, but in fact, they're hoping maybe even to start a little bit, maybe even before the end of the year, but publicly we're just saying January right now, because we think that's a safe date at this point.
And as you mentioned, substantial conversations with Omaha Country Club in terms of the event we hope does take place next year, which is the PGA Senior Tour again, and some major tourism and visitors to our community right through there. But you feel like you've had that coordinated well and is documented in your conversations with them?
Yeah, well, I'll keep our fingers crossed on that, Mr. Festerson, yeah. That would be good for our community, particularly when we know we've had a couple of events already canceled. So, If I can add one more thing, I forgot to say this when I first came up to the podium, but Mr. Kratz, thank you very much for your service. It's been a pleasure working with you, and it'll be difficult working with a new city attorney that I'm not familiar with, but you do have some good staff, and I'm confident that your good work will continue. But thank you again for your service, your public service, Paul.
We got to remind him to change his cell phone too after he leaves. So, Mr. Boozer, one last question about the timeline. So, if the PGA event does happen, that's in July. So you wouldn't foresee any major construction disruption during that time, right, in this area?
Yeah, the plan is it will hopefully be substantially done with all of our exterior vertical improvements by then. But we have made a commitment to OCC that we would stop any major construction traffic during the event. So that's part of our agreement with them, that we would do that for that week.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for your work on this and for coming down today.
Yep, thank you.
I would motion to approve items 18 through 22.
Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 23, a resolution to approve the Trio 15th and Farnham Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located southeast of 15th and Farnham Streets in an amount up to $710,000.
The public hearing on item 23 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, good afternoon. Don Seaton on behalf of the project and with the Omaha City Planning Department. This is a downtown project. It's in the yellow here, southeast corner of 15th and Farnham, very near the Gene Leahy Mall. Involves a comprehensive rehabilitation of 3 adjoining buildings. The most prominent and recognizable was the one that had previously been occupied by the Louisiana Jazz restaurant, Jimmy John's next door. So it's these 3 buildings. And here's the proposed renovation. It is a comprehensive rehabilitation, 18 residential units on the upper levels, Main Street retail, about 7,200 square feet of commercial space. Developer is Bread Pudding LLC. Jim Bouger, who you just heard from, is the managing member. This is about a $7.3 million project. They're asking for $710,000 in TIF support. It's been approved by the TIF committee, meets our TIF program criteria, complies with the city's master plan. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Afternoon again. Jim Bouger, 10250 Regency Circle. This project is near and dear to my heart, so I appreciate the city's support and work with Mr. Seaton and Bridget to work through the TIF aspects of the project. We're looking forward to redeveloping this Signatures intersection in the city of Omaha. There's obviously a lot of good things happening in the general vicinity with the Kiewit Plaza redevelopment and all of the great things that are going on downtown, the Performing Arts Center and some of the other, the Heinz Project, the Mercantile just down the street. So we're excited to be able to have the opportunity to redevelop this corner and make it look a little snazzier than it does today. And hopefully, again, this is my discussion with Mr. Festerson. Hopefully we'll get through all these difficult times we're dealing with, and the downtown area will be active and productive again. So anyway, happy to answer any questions you might have on the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I am against number 23, as I am most tax increment financing, and I might need just a little bit more than 3 minutes because I'd like to read a couple of things so that people will know that these are not my words, that I've done some homework, and that these words are not necessarily ignorant statements. The first article is from goodjobsfirst.org. The other article is from lawinformation.com. It explains tax increment financing in general. Yes, it may not be specific to Omaha, but in Omaha, we don't really know what the difference is. We don't hear anything about it from the World Herald. They don't explain it. The local media doesn't cover it, maybe because it hasn't been explained by the city fathers. But I'm going to read. Hopefully I'll get through at least the first one. They're similar. Tax increment financing subsidizes companies refunding or diverting a portion of their taxes to help finance development in an area or less frequently on a project site. Helps to pay infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Parking lots can also be used for acquiring land, for paying expenses, legal fees, et cetera. Demolishing and rehabbing buildings. We have one of those today. Cleaning up contaminated areas, job training programs. Some states allow it to go directly to subsidize private development. Yeah. It's authorized at state level and administered by local governments. Yeah. Defines it as such and such. Criteria for blighted areas. I'm very close to, I can't tell from the map, I might in a severely blighted area, and that's news to us. I think somebody declared that recently so that they might be able to do something in our area, including maybe a multifamily apartment building on my street. I don't care for that. As businesses located in this district and in the area redevelops, the property values rise. But the property tax on the guy that's developing the property stays the same if he even stays in Omaha. Now, if he doesn't, the gist of these articles are that the revenue doesn't come because the project isn't successful, then the city has to pay for it. Well, what does that mean? Probably means the citizen. You can read it. The second stream, well, two streams of the increasing property tax values of, guess what, the people that live there. The first stream is set at the original amount of the property value before the redevelopment, known as the base rate, et cetera, et cetera. That goes typically to the school district or the city's general fund. But the second stream contains additional tax money generated by the higher property value or the tax increment. On who? Me or the developer that maybe that was like ConAgra? They're gone, aren't they? So
Thanks.
who pays that?
Your time's expired.
That stream does not go
For
to the
rest of
city
your
or
remarks,
schools,
Mr.
but
Storer,
it's
your
kept
time's
separate,
expired.
used to pay for the redevelopment. So some of the things that I've said in the past are essentially correct.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Public hearing is closed. Second. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 24, a resolution to approve the Bohemian Apartments Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located northwest of 12th and William Streets in an amount up to $2,050,000.
The public hearing on item 24 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, good afternoon, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning Department. On behalf of the project, this is a project located immediately south of the Old Market area of downtown. Old Market be up there. It's this site here, which is an assemblage of 9 parcels, mostly vacant. There are 2 single-family home structures still there. Those will be cleared, demolished, site cleared, and there'll be a new 112-unit market rate apartment building constructed. This kind of sits up overlooking the 13th Street corridor. Project developer is William 12 LLC, managed by Tom McClay and Mike Peter. Total project investment is about $17.8 million. They're requesting $2,050,000 in TIF support. Project's an appropriate land use for the area, complies with the city's master plan, and been approved by the planning board and the TIF committee. And we will miss our city attorney, Paul Kratz, on that TIF committee. And I thank you for all the wisdom you've shared with me over the years, and you will be missed. Anyway, we ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Tom McClay, 3814 Farnham Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I'm here as the owner and developer of the project. Really happy to answer any questions. I think Mr. Seaton gave you some good background. The only one item I'd say is there are no structures on it. All structures have been cleared off the property. And I would echo thanks to Mr. Kratz for all of his many years of service. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Luis Jimenez, 3306 First Street. I'm a proponent. I appreciate the developer coming in and building these residential units. The area is working itself out. I think that it's been difficult the last couple of years for business owners there. And if this unit or this project goes ahead, it'll get more people to come to the area. I've seen a few business owners close up besides like the Bohemian Cafe and stuff like that, but there's been business owners that bring their business there on 13th Street and only are able to operate for 6 months, less than a year. But I think this year it's been a difficult year for everyone. I wanted to say that anecdotally. I also do want to join everyone else congratulating the city attorney for his service to the city. The one time I went up to his office, he told me to come back anytime. I never did. So if you will oblige me, council, so that I could take a better picture of Mr. Kratz.
Without objection. Make it quick, Luis.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Second, roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 25, a resolution to approve a special use permit to allow outdoor sports and recreation in the AG District located at 4906 South 180th Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on item 25 begins at this time. We have a representative in the queue on the phone, Mr. Dan Dozel. Will you unmute Mr. Dozel? Mr. Dozel, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm a civil engineer and I'm on the Board of Directors for Victory Riding Academy. Previously, they were at 45th and Madison. They've had a chance and a great opportunity to move to a facility that has an indoor riding arena. We've gone through the comments that the Planning Department have no objections, and we'll install those in the spring as soon as weather permits.
And you're at 35.
Questions?
You're at 3552 Farnham.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dan, if you want to take a minute, I think what Victory Riding does is a great contribution to our community, and wondered maybe if you wanted to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about the great work they do.
Certainly. You know, their primary, it's really a remarkable story, and forgive me because I don't have all the details, and Tony was involved at work. He has a full-time job in addition to this, and wasn't able to attend today. But when you read the mission and the service they provide to adults and children of all ages, they have incredible success with, for instance, autism. The horseback riding, it mimics the swaying of a walk, and they've gotten scientific proof of the therapeutic capabilities that the horses provide, as well as the connection with the community, and then the mental therapeutic opportunities that they provide to the first responders and other working citizens of our community. It's really remarkable in what they do. In this indoor arena, before at 45th and Madison, they were limited by weather. This indoor arena will allow them to do a 12-month operation, and I just see exciting, great things ahead of them and for our community and the services they provide.
Thanks, Dan. I'll move for approval.
Second.
Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 26, a resolution to approve a special use permit to allow funeral services in the GI District located at 9370 North 45th Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on item 26 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Sanford, architect for the project, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have about this specific project.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Item 27, a resolution to approve a special use permit to allow auto sales in a GC district located southwest of 40th Street and Bedford Avenue. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 27 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Rashawn Jackson, 3717 North 23rd Street.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
Item 28, an application to consider a Class D liquor license for Pacific Convenient Mart located at 7444 Pacific Street.
The public hearing on item 28 begins at this time. We'll open up the public hearing with a representative registered to participate by the Zoom. Mr. Mike Polk, 2712 South 87th Avenue. Mr. Polk.
Good afternoon. I'm here with the owner of 744 Pacific Street, Tesfaye Kinde, to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Second, roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 29, an application to consider a Class D liquor license for Mega Saver located at 8409 West Center Road.
The public hearing on item 29 begins at this time. We'll begin the proponents with registered speakers, either Kamal Samiev or Lola Kalikova.
Good afternoon, Council. Mr. President, Lola Khalikova. I'm here with TFL Inc., located at 202 South 73rd Street. We're applying for the liquor license for our new store location at 8409 West Center Road. Here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Hi, I'm Kamal Samiev with Mega Saver Corporate Office, 202 South 73rd Street. Here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
We have a couple removed. Okay. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
The public hearings on agenda items 36 through 40 and 43 through 65 begin at this time. If you are or wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent. If you are a proponent or opponent, items, I believe 41 and 42 were removed from consent.
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette, Omaha, 68132. I am opposed to 51, 52, 53, and 58 on the basic theory that awful lot of money that's being thrown out there that somehow affects my pocketbook that I maybe don't care for. Money spent going around the nation to the National League of Cities, Nebraska municipalities, the Municipal Land Bank. Oh my goodness, the Omaha set me free, but that's okay. Number 58 is African American Empowerment Network. You know, a lot of these promote diversity, etc. But the point being, why should I pay for my representatives to travel all around the state of Nebraska and other states and maybe even nations, finding out what other people do? We didn't elect other people. We elected the people here. So we don't necessarily want the ideas from Washington State, et cetera, affecting our resolutions. Let's keep it local, be a little more transparent, because we don't know what was said in all those meetings with the League of Municipalities, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone else in the chamber wishing to speak on these items? We'll now go to a registered Zoom participant, Jen Bauer, 5501 Leavenworth Street, regarding item 50. Ms. Bauer, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, City Council members and Council President Jerem.
I'll be emailing my statement to you for the record shortly. Thank you for allowing me to do this remotely. I'm speaking in opposition to consent agenda item 50. This is a request for 35 police utility vehicles, the funds to be taken from the 2020 general fund in the amount of approximately $1.2 million. The attached quote on the agenda is for the vehicles, and it was initiated on April 6th of 2020 and runs from the period of March 11th, 2020 to 11 of 2021. My first concern, by my very simple math and not having access to all information, is that this approximate increase or replacement of the fleet is 18 to 20%. There are 73 patrol districts. There are command vehicles for each district and other departmental vehicle needs. And I fully understand that police vehicles run a full day, all day, and are shared across shifts and require servants and replacements due to accidents and other mechanical breakdown. They are in continual use, and I understand this. My issue is not with replacing these vehicles per se, but in the manner in which these funds are being requested. The timing, in my opinion, is not a good look, and the optics are poor. In 2020, a year when the city experienced a budget shortfall of $80 million, yet received CARES Act funding of $71 million from the county, we would, in my estimation, have a shortfall in the range of $9 billion. So the shortfall has been described as catastrophic to the city, and rightfully so. But the city didn't qualify for CARES Act funds, and we canceled summer camps, we closed libraries, we furloughed and laid off city employees. We relied on the county to help us out of this budget hole. The city took measures to mitigate the impact of COVID, and the reduction in spending as listed on the mayor's website from the 2019 COVID checklist showed a small reduction in police costs from $850,000. This was mainly community engagement activities and trainings. And there was another $3.3 million, which was attributed to salaries and overtime. Nowhere was mention of fleet replacement. It is important to outline that eligible expenses for CARES Act include medical expenses, public health expenses, PPE, and payroll for police. It does not mention fleet replacement. On the mayor's website, there is a link to the coronavirus relief bill from the U.S. Treasury, which was updated September 2nd of 2020. It outlines the necessary expenditures. It states that money should be used for costs not covered in the budget. And additionally, in the 2021 budget that was recently approved, in the general fund section, it is noted to restrict equipment purchases to critical needs only. This document also states that there's a hope that the city will receive grants to cover the losses in the general fund. I oppose this purchase out of the 2020 budget as an 11th hour attempt to utilize monies that were received via CARE Act funds from the county. And while the city may not have to follow the guidelines of the CARE Act in practice, I feel that it should in theory. I see no valid reason why we can't wait until 2021, and I'd ask the city and council to determine if the monies from the general fund of 2020 can be utilized to serve the community in a more thoughtful manner. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The public hearing is closed. Is there a motion on 36 through 40 and 43 through 65? Oh, Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I apologize. I forgot to ask this during pre-council today, but on number 45, I'll probably ask Mr. Stubbe. One of these have to do with speed limits. There was one that was I needed an explanation for the West Dodge Road from 120th to the city limits west, that there was a rescission. I think it said it was rescinded. So I'm not sure what, because I think that stretch, or in part, is 70 miles an hour as you get past 156th, and I couldn't find the explanation within the documentation except that it just said it was rescinded.
So Bob Stubbe, Public Works. I'll try my best on this one. So not having that information in front of me. So typically, City of Omaha has responsibility for West Dodge up to a point that is just directly to the west of 120th Street before you enter onto the expressway itself. So our authority with regard to the expressway is limited to what the state of Nebraska determines. Does that help answer your question with regard to that?
I think so. So, but I guess I wondered why it was rescinded. Wouldn't that have been the case prior to this action?
As
That
far as
that the state would have had that jurisdiction.
the state has the jurisdiction with regard to that. Now, if there's something that we need to do internally just to kind of concur with that, I don't believe that's the case. I believe the state has the jurisdiction on the expressway, and they can make those changes to the speed limit as they wish.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The other item I just wanted to briefly bring up was item number 64, which is the appointment of Chris Carnes to the Airport Authority. And Chris actually just, her last, she served on the Omaha Planning Board for her full term, which just expired this last December. Planning board meeting was her last meeting, and I wanted to publicly thank her for her service on that board. And the action we have today is to actually have her fill out her former husband's remaining term on the Airport Authority, Dave Carnes. So I wanted to wish Chris the best on that, as well as thank the administration and the mayor for recognizing that Chris has a lot to give to our community, and this is a great board for her to have that opportunity.
Thank you. Vice President Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. And it's agenda item, or item 65. I don't know if anybody's from finance here, but maybe from mayor staff. And it's just the amount of why it would be on our agenda. Is anybody here to answer that? I mean, we had it recently with another director that came back. I just don't recall. And of course, it's under 20,000, so I'm just wondering why it would be in front of us, especially if it's coming from the general fund. Anybody want to guess? Because I'm going to lay it over if nobody's here.
Is your question?
It's a moving expense for 6,000.
Since it's under 20,000, why does the city council need to approve it?
Correct.
Because I think it's not normally something that is, because it's outside the compensation, and it's an additional, I think it's in the.
But it's under 20,000, so.
It may be that it's not in the regular course, that you would then have to actually get council's approval for it.
Okay, well, if nobody's
That's
here,
what I believe
I'll
it is.
motion to lay it over for 1 week.
So there's a request to remove item 65 from the consent agenda resolutions and lay it over till the next week. And there's a second.
I'm not saying I'm against it, I just, there has to be more to it, that it would be in front of us for the amount that obviously we don't need to approve.
Okay. There is a, yeah. In terms of removing an agenda item from consent, though, Madam Clerk, it's my understanding that can be done. That doesn't need a motion.
To lay it over, correct, you can remove it
But
from
to lay it
consent.
over needs a motion.
Correct.
So the item's been removed. There's a item on the floor is a motion to lay item 65 over for a week, and we have a couple lights. And I'll get to you, Councilmember Melton, but we have Councilmember Gray in the queue first.
Let's get, I want to talk about a couple of other things. Let's get this answered first, and I'll come back, Mr. President. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Melton.
Well, and I don't know the answer, and I understand this, but I would just be concerned that we've made the job offer, and that if we don't approve this, then, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Kalsevich, maybe? It says that he's supposed to start employment on December 11th, and I would just hate to have his move and everything delayed to get an answer. And it looks like there may have been somebody that came down here to answer the question. Mr. Curtis? I'm going to go ahead and defer to Councilmember Palermo to hopefully get his question answered. I'll defer my time, my late.
Steve Curtis, City Finance. If you could repeat the question, that way I'll make sure I'm answering exactly what you want to know.
So item number 65, the question for me was, because of the amount, why would it be on our agenda coming out of the general fund for moving expenses?
We could check with Mr. Kratz, but I think it's required in the charter that if we pay moving expenses for somebody, it has to be approved by council.
Regardless of the amount.
Regardless of the amount.
Would law like to weigh in on that?
Paul Kratz, City Attorney. I'm really not sure on that, but it is an unusual expenditure for when we hire employees, and I suspect that's why it's before the council.
Well, we've got some very experienced people in the room with the finance director and the city attorney that couldn't actually answer the answer, so I'm going to still withhold or take this off the agenda and ask that it be delayed or set back for 1 week.
Well, and if I could maybe go to
Well, you could
Westlaw
vote.
and search the city charter, I'm guessing that that's it too, that
Well,
the
you could
city
always
charter
vote
would
no,
require
and then
it.
it would be approved.
Okay.
For the layover.
Okay, so there is a resolution that accompanies this agenda item that has a number of whereases. In the fourth whereas, it says Omaha Municipal Code Section 10-242E permits the City of Omaha, with City Council approval, to reimburse the actual cost of transporting persons and personal property based on hiring an employee from outside the immediate area. So, in the opinion of the chair, that's probably why it's on our agenda. Is the movement and the second still wish a vote on the item motion to lay over for 1 week on item 65? Pete did.
No, I'll withdraw that.
Okay. Do you wish to withdraw your second, Mr. Festerson? Okay. Is there a motion on the consent agenda resolutions except for items 41 and 42?
Move to approve 36 through 40 and 43 through 65.
Second.
Roll call.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson. Gray. Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Would you call up items 41 and 42 for one public hearing, please?
Items 41 and 42 are resolutions to approve the contract with DPS LLC, Inc. in the amount of $53,800 for the 2020-2021 sidewalk snow and ice removal in the southeast and southwest quadrants of the city of Omaha.
The public hearing on items 41 and 42 begin at this time. I believe we have someone from Public Works that wants to explain the assessment and to make as part of the record a memorandum dated 8 December 2020 regarding this item. You have that.
Good
Mr.
afternoon,
Rouser.
Austin Rouser, Public Works. I did prepare a memo today explaining to you the costs and what we have done with our assessment costs is with the contract before you for DPS being on the high side for the 6 to 12 inch and the over 12 inch snow. We did remove those items from the calculation of the assessment, the fee assessment. So we issued a memorandum today for the averages for those assessments that would be assessed citywide. For 1 to 6 inches would be $3.13 per linear foot. That was a slight increase over last winter. 6 to 12 inches is $4.03 per linear foot. That's a decrease from last year. And 12 inches or greater of $5.75 per linear foot, also a decrease from last year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard on items 41 and 42 on the consent agenda resolutions? Public hearing is closed. Council Vice President Palermo, you're recognized.
I must have been from before.
Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Oh, thank you. And so we passed this ordinance little over a year ago because a couple years ago, this council, when we had had a bad winter, and we had also had very high bids on the snow removal. We had people who were getting $800 to $1,500 for residential property to have, if snow had to be removed from their sidewalks for whatever reason. We had, somebody in the hospital. We had somebody sick or injured and weren't able to do it. And the amounts were just so astronomical that we did pass this ordinance, and we asked that there be an engineer's estimate. And basically just to recap the ordinance, what we did is we said, it's either the engineer, we charge the residents of the city of Omaha, either the engineer's estimate or the actual cost of what we're paying the private companies to remove. So that would go to everybody in the city. And in this case, it looks like the engineer's estimate, at least for the 6 to 12 or over 6 inches, is going to be less than what the bids came in. I mean, the only problem I have with this is I wish that the bids were done earlier, because at this point in time, this bid was so high that I almost think it should be denied. We've denied other bids that came in just astronomically high. Usually it's CSO projects that we've had come in, but we have the option to do that. The problem is we've already approved the other quadrants of our city. We can't leave half the city without snow removal and the other half with the opportunity to have snow removed from the sidewalks. But I think if we were to maybe do these bids a little earlier and do some reach out, and Austin, if you could come back up, I just want to ask you a couple things. And Austin, I appreciate you going back to the ordinance, looking at it. I understand it's a new ordinance, and so it's a newer ordinance, and you're in a new position. So we kind of had a combination of things. And you went back and got this done today, and I do appreciate it. Now, the other part of the ordinance is that it needs to get published to the people. It needs to also be up on the website, because we need to let all the citizens in Omaha know. And I think we have one person from the media here, but if we could get a little story, that'd be great. But we need to let people know that if the city has to come out and shovel their sidewalk, even the engineer's estimate are a lot higher than if you hired somebody yourself to do your driveway, or solicited your neighbor's teenager to do it. And also for neighbors that maybe want to call in and complain about their neighbor next door, perhaps go knock on their door, maybe see if there's a problem. I've said this before you go call the city and complain about somebody, maybe see if they're having some kind of problem. Maybe they aren't there, they're in the hospital. So try and reach out to your neighbors to see if there's a problem before we get hit with, it looks like if we have more than 6 inches of snow, between 6 and 12, an average house, I kind of solicited Mr. Palermo and Mr. Harding's advice, but it looks like maybe the average residential home would be about 100 linear feet. So that's going to be about $400 if the city has to come out. So that could be a significant cost to somebody who's not expecting it. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of this. And although this is about half of what we charged people a couple of years ago, I'm still looking at the bids, and the bids still seem extraordinarily high for what somebody has to pay somebody to come shovel their walks. And I understand, this is complaint-based. People are only getting charges if they fail to do what they want to do. But I just want to make sure, Austin, that this gets published pursuant to the ordinance, so that if somebody comes back to us when we sit as the Board of Equalization and they come in and are complaining about these bills, we can show them that what we've done, how we tried to protect them, and how we tried to notice them of what the cost was going to be ahead of time. I want to thank you for getting these to us at this point. And it looks like the 1 to 6 inches, at least in these quadrants, is going to be slightly less than the engineer's estimate. I mean, about 20 cents, but still less. And so it's the lesser amount. Now, the taxpayers are going to have to pay for the overage. And that's why next year, I would really like to see if we could get
some small businesses. If we could maybe work with the HR&R department to try and get maybe small businesses to bid on these contracts, so we just don't have a sole bidder at this amount. I mean, the 53,800, it's an extraordinary amount that if we have to send people out, the city's gonna have to pay for a portion of that.
Sure.
So I guess I didn't really have a question, just more, just asking that we do try and follow the ordinance and appreciate you getting this to us so that we can put it on the record. And you've got a copy.
It's been made a part of the record.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton.
further.
Vice President Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Rouser, I do have a question. Just reading through your quick email that we got today. So for the one that you sent us pertaining to these two items, I wasn't clear. You said based on your comparison of the workforce, does that mean the city of Omaha, if we were to send and do this in-house to do this work, this is what it would be per linear foot? Or is this what you've changed for all the bids and all the quadrants for sidewalk snow removal?
So we took all of the bids that came in, and we called the high bids that were solely bid in the two quadrants. We threw those out of the calculation. Took all the other bids and took the average, and then there's an administrative 15% that's added to that for the costs that are incurred by the Public Works Department to do the assessments, give the notices, do the inspections, document the issues, follow up with property owners, those kinds of things. So that's where those costs come from.
Okay, so there's another concern for me, because just on the last item that we had the whereas, and then it was read and it made sense for the moving expenses. We also have the whereas in front of us to where DPS was submitted a bid, the sole bid, and whereas recommended by the mayor, the contract. I mean, Paul, I'm not picking on you, but how does this work from a legal standpoint that we have a lowest and best bid approved in front of us, and we may or may not approve it? If there's going to be changes.
There's no changes to the bid.
So we're just going to keep it the way it is?
Well, no, so if I may, Mr. President?
It'd be up to Mr. Vice President Palermo to yield some time.
Okay, well.
Otherwise, we have to go in the queue order.
Yeah, no, I'll keep going.
Mr. Wiesen explained it to me prior to council. We had a long discussion, which is why I have all of this in front of me. So if you'd want, he's in the back, he could probably come down and explain it
Yeah, I'll have
too.
Ryan come down, because I wasn't privy to that information, and that's why I'm asking these questions.
Mr. Wiesen, City Law. Question is whether if you approve this or don't approve it, and if you approve it, how does an assessment get assessed?
Ryan Wiesen, Assistant City Attorney. The contract that is before the council for approval today is for what the city would pay for the snow removal process, and that may be different than what an individual property owner may pay based upon an assessment per the ordinances that were passed. If you look at Omaha Municipal Code, section 34-335, it's a rather lengthy provision, but there's in particular a sentence that is applicable to this situation. It states that the council may thereupon levy a special assessment on such lot or land sufficient to pay the costs of the fees established by the Public Works Director on an annual basis pursuant to section 34-337A below, or the costs and expenses of clearance or removal of ice or snow or other accumulations or obstructions pursuant to a contract for services entered into according to the terms of section 34-337B below, whichever is less. So in this situation, we have an estimate that's been made by the Public Works Director setting forth certain fees on a per foot linear basis for certain inch levels of snowfall accumulation. And we have a contract for services to DPS in these two quadrants setting forth a per foot linear basis for snow removal at different amounts. If the contract is passed and approved by the council, the city will pay the contracted amount to DPS that's set forth in the contract documents before the city council today. But when it comes time to make that special assessment for the snow removal upon the affected property owners, the city can only assess the lesser amount on a per foot linear basis to those property owners. So in this case, for 0 to 6 inches, the lesser amount would be the amount in the contract, but for 6 inches or more on a per foot linear basis, the city would have to assess the engineered estimate that's been provided to you and would have to absorb the additional cost in its general fund that it is paid to DPS for the actual work performed.
Okay. Okay, so I got that. So, thank you. So, Mr. Rouser, please, if you would, I have another question for you. And it's the same question I asked during pre-council, or when you say city absorbs, that means we're going to pay the contractor what they have in the bid?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So would it be more beneficial to perform this in-house with city personnel to go and clear these walks for a lesser rate than what we'd pay this contractor?
I'm not sure where those resources would come from, but we can look into that.
Okay. Do you know how many street maintenance employees we're short right now?
Offhand, I do not.
Mr. Stubbe, question to you. Do you know how many street maintenance employees we're short right now?
Mr. Stubbe, Director of Public Works.
Bob Stubbe, Public Works. I think that information was provided a couple weeks back, so I don't have that with me today, but we can get that for you again.
Okay. So I'll just assume then, thank you, Director. I'll assume we're short people, so we're going to absorb these costs, although we don't have the positions filled to actually take care of this work at a lesser rate for the taxpayers of Omaha instead of just paying a contractor. I mean, I just summed it up right there, right? A lot of work went into this by Councilmember Melton a couple of years ago to get the word out to contractors. Hey, you're going to pay a lot of money, because even if the news puts a story out, somebody's not going to shovel their walk. That's just the way it is. So unfortunately, you have to assess somebody. But if we want to save money, let's fill these spots, self-perform this, maybe even get rid of this whole contract and not have to pay this amount, because we could self-perform for less than we're going to pay that amount for. Again, if you're in the snow business, you can see we got one bid for clearing snow. Get your bids together, submit them. These were higher than the other areas, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Melton, your light's still on. Do you wish?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm.
Is there a motion and a
satisfied at
second?
this point. Well, we have to move, honestly, we have to move to improve it. We only have one bid, and we can't leave half of the city without getting snow removed from sidewalks that are in front of bus routes where people need to, sometimes who are handicapped. So, although I don't like it, I'm gonna move to improve it because we don't have it.
Roll call.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-1. Item 66, an ordinance to amend Section 10-187 of the Omaha Municipal Code to lower the financial limits for the selection of firms being awarded contracts for professional services. A is an amendment of the whole requested by Councilmember Pauls.
The public hearing on item 66 was held November 24. What's the pleasure of the council? On the amendment of the whole? Second. Roll call. Did you have your light on? Okay. Roll call.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 67, an ordinance supplementing and amending ordinance number 37507 to issue sanitary sewage system revenue bonds. A is an amendment of the whole requested by the Finance Department.
Public hearing was held November 24. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 68, an ordinance approving an interlocal agreement with the Papio Missouri River Natural Resource District in the amount of $500,000 for the West Papio Storm Sewer Outfall improvements.
Public hearing on item 68 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 69, an ordinance approving an interlocal agreement with Heartland B-Cycle.
Public hearing on item 69 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents?
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Birch Street. I'm a proponent. I have a one-year membership, so I think since I'm here, and this will be on the record as a proponent. They are constantly providing more infrastructure to their model, putting new stations across town. I normally use it for midtown, downtown, North Omaha. But any help, any improvements that they incorporate into their business is a plus for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to the registered speaker, Benny Foltz, Executive Director, Heartland Bike Share, 618 South Washington Street, Papillion.
Hi, Benny Foltz, Executive Director of Heartland Bike Share. We run the Heartland B-Cycle program, here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. We'll next go to Ken Smith, Director of Parking and Mobility.
Ken Smith, Public Works. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Kevin Anderson, City of Omaha Mayor's Office. Here actually speaking for the Metro Smart Cities Initiative, which is chaired by Mayor Stothert. Efforts like Smart Cities supports, among many things, increasing mobility and supporting mobility solutions, of which this partnership represents. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other speakers on item 69? Public hearing is closed.
Item 70, an ordinance approving the 1420 Villa Rose Court Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Agreement located at 1420 Villa Rose Court in an amount up to $250,000.
Public hearing on item 70 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, good afternoon. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning, available for any questions you have.
Are there any other proponents?
Mike Gawley, Executive Director of Holy Name Housing, 4324 4th Street, here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue. I'm opposed to it for pretty much the same reasons as on the other ones, but to expand on those comments, this ordinance doesn't say anything about the city's participation. Ordinarily, the city does participate, sometimes maybe by the sale of bonds. This doesn't tell us anything about that. The OPE pays it off over a time period. Tax increment funds. But if the incremental revenue from that is not sufficient to pay off the bonds, the city has to make up the difference. Or it may be used to repay the developer for improvements they made. It doesn't mention anything about land banks, which the articles I quoted do, that the cities
Mr. Storr, land
sometimes
bank's
use that.
not on the agenda. Stick to the agenda.
Okay. Well, I do protest because it is part of the city structure. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, the taxpayers are not obligated in the event of a default. There's a promissory note from the developer that would pay that to the city. Are there any other opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 71, an ordinance to approve an agreement with LexisNexis CopLogic Solutions in the amount of $67,560 to develop and implement an online citizen reporting system.
The public hearing on item 71 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 72, an ordinance to approve an agreement with the University of Nebraska Medical Center for certain forensic and crime lab testing services.
The Public hearing on item 72 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 73, an ordinance to transfer $166,902 in the 2021 budget of the City of Omaha from the wage adjustment account to city departments.
The public hearing on item 73 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 74, an ordinance to transfer $2,374,869 in the 2021 budget of the City of Omaha from the wage adjustment account to the City Police Department.
The public hearing on item 74 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 75, an ordinance to amend Section 23-177 of the Omaha Municipal Code to add the employment classification entitled Registered Land Surveyor. Personnel Board recommends approval.
The public hearing on item 75 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Jim Begley, City HR, here answering any questions.
Are there any other proponents?
Austin Rouser, Public Works, here to answer any questions.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Vice President Palermo.
There we go. As we heard today about things being important, a couple houses worried about a driveway and then storage sheds that hundreds of people look at. Sidewalk clearing in which the city doesn't have enough employees to self-perform, and we would just either wipe it clean for everybody or pay more to a contractor for doing the work. But then what we have is, and nothing against creating jobs, these are great, but reading through this, it says that it was a part-time retiree that was filling this spot, but now it's a full-time job, management, and the classification pay range of 18.3, which is 70-some plus $1,000 a year. That, what I read was a part-time retiree was doing it. And back to the important things, we need to focus on getting them spots filled from people who are really making a difference in a city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item.
Item 76, an ordinance to approve an agreement with HSA Bank for claims administrative services for the city health savings and flexible spending accounts.
The public hearing on item 76 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 77, an ordinance to approve an agreement with Minnesota Life Insurance Company to provide life insurance coverage to eligible employees of the City of Omaha.
The public hearing on item 77 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Non-action items, items 78 through 96 do not require a public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on an agenda for consideration.
Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 3:43.